Good evening, church family. It's good to see you via online. I was hoping to be back in the saddle here tonight, and got a COVID test earlier today, and Lisa early had to make a decision because we hadn't got the results back then. I never have wanted to fail a test anymore in my life than that earlier today. And hopefully we'll be able to see you on Sunday, and looking forward. My dad is feeling much better. We're thankful for that, and looking just be back with my family and being back with church family, and so anyway, hopefully that'll come all together and get to see you guys on Sunday. Hey, my heart's burdened for America. Some of y'all sure known or have watched maybe or listened to the news, and we need to pray for America tonight. I don't have the answers. I don't know of anybody who does. I know God does. And concerned about just the things that are going on in Washington, D.C. tonight. And we need to pray for leadership and wisdom. And there's some good people, I think, on maybe even in the same party that just have some varying views of things. But we need to pray for them and ask that God would direct, and that ultimately that He would get glory. And so with that said, I've decided to preach a message that we preached back in April of 2016, so almost 5 years ago. And just been praying today, and I have been moved by what has happened in Washington, D.C. Been praying for that. Was on a call last night with my friend, Brother Chuck Harding, and a representative there from Idaho that's an independent Baptist guy, just like us. Brother Russ Folker is his name. And anyway, so America has been on my heart, and then just with things going on, and this thought, what to do when we can't see the Lord. And so I would ask you tonight to take your Bible and let's dig in the Word and get some thoughts from Him. We'll read these 17 verses here tonight and then get right at it. I hope that there's been some pleasant things about your day. Thank you, Brother Galen, for help running the service tonight. Brother Barry is out, and I'm sure some of this has already been said, and he had a meeting that he had to be tomorrow morning and had to leave, I think, earlier today in Minnesota. And so pray for him and Miss Barry as she's back, I'm sure, with you guys tonight. And but then pray for the Loves, if you will, and as the funeral there on Friday, and then also Miss Denise, and she has been on my heart today and thoughts. And Miss Denise, if you're watching, we've been thinking about you today, as we know that you had your funeral for your mother today. And so, but let's dig together in the Word, and may the Lord help us. This is the day that the Lord hath made, and we will rejoice and be glad in it. All right, shall we? Job chapter 23. Did I say that? I don't know if I said that earlier. Job chapter 23, 17 verses. I'm going to just jump right in and read, and you follow along and maybe catch up with me. All right, Job 23, verse 1. Then Job answered and said, even today is my complaint bitter. My stroke is heavier than my groaning. Oh, that I knew where I might find him, talking about the Lord, that I might come even to his seat. I would order my cause before him and fill my mouth with arguments. I would know the words which he would answer me, and understand what he would say unto me. Will he plead against me with his great power? No, but he would put strength in me. There the righteous might dispute with him, so should I be delivered forever from my judge. Behold, I go forward, but he is not there, and backward, but I cannot perceive him. On the left hand where he doth work, but I cannot behold him. He hideth himself on the right hand, that I cannot see him. But he knoweth the way that I take. And when he hath tried me, I shall come forth as gold. My foot hath held his steps. His way have I kept, and not declined. What a testimony. Verse 12. Neither have I gone back from the commandment of his lips. I have esteemed the words of his mouth more than my necessary food. But he is in one mind, and who can turn him? And what his soul desireth, even that he doeth. For he performeth the thing that is appointed for me. And many such things are with him. Therefore am I troubled at his presence when I consider. I am afraid of him, for God maketh my heart soft, and the Almighty troubleth me. because I was not cut off before the darkness, neither hath he covered the darkness from my face. So tonight, for just a little bit, I want to challenge you on this thought: what to do when you can't see God. What to do when we can't see God. You know, there's certain times where it's hard to see the Lord. And we necessarily are not talking about his physical presence, even though that many of the people in the Bible, they saw God. They got to see, or at least God's Spirit, or see an angel that's there. But we for sure feel the presence of God. Somebody even told me just here recently about how they felt so strong that God was speaking to them. They didn't hear it audibly, but they could just feel him in their heart. And many of us, we understand that feeling. I remember thinking about Washington, D.C., of course, today and things going on there. I remember several years ago that I went to Washington, D.C. I went right outside there in Bowie, Maryland, and a friend of mine, Jim Heberly, went to get married, and I was I was a groomsman there, and another friend of mine went with me, and my brother John also went with me as well, and so I'd asked my dad if I could take John, and I think John might have been 15 or 16. And so I was going to Washington, D.C. and going for this wedding anyway. I thought that maybe we could take a day and go to the Smithsonian and some of the things that's there. And so we did that. And I remember, I think it was in the Air and Space Museum. They're part of the Smithsonian, and many of you know there's several buildings there, the Smithsonian. It's not just one building, just a complex of different buildings. And so I remember there and looking at different things, looking at the NASA things, looking at the Spirit of St. Louis, if my memory serves me right, and Charles Lindbergh, and just the different things that was there. And my friend Jason and my brother John, they wanted to go to a specific part, and I was over here. So I said, that's fine. But I said, John, you make for sure. You guys meet back at this place here. And I think it was maybe an hour, if my memory serves me right. Maybe it was 30 minutes. And anyway, so we split apart, and it came up to that time that we had set apart or set to be able to meet, and John wasn't there. It was 15 minutes after the time. John wasn't there. 30 minutes after the time. John wasn't there. An hour had transpired. Here's a big place. Washington, D.C. is a big place. This complex is a big place. Hour, he's not there. An hour and a half, he's not there, my friends. I tried to call them. I couldn't get a hold of my friend on his cell phone. And this has been so many years ago. And come to find out that 2 hours later, they kind of stroll up. And I'm thinking in my mind before they get there, it's like, if I go back home and my brother John is not with me, my dad is going to kill me. That's what I was thinking in my mind. I was so worried. John so nonchalantly, and my friend Jason walked up, and it was like it was no big deal. But it was a big deal to me because I could not see my brother, and I was entrusted with his care. Some of you moms and dads, you understand that when you have, especially you moms, you're out in a store and you don't see your children. Maybe you're out at the playground and you can't see them, and there's just a split moment or a split second or maybe a few moments that you're just, your heart kind of sinks because you don't see someone that you love. I think on the flip side of kids, I remember several years back that I was in a large gathering. I think it was in Oklahoma City. And this little boy, he might have been 2 years old. He walks up to me, and I mean, he is just, it's a bucket load of tears. And I say, hey, buddy, how's it going? I said, what's wrong? What's going on? He said, I can't find my mommy. And my heart sunk when I heard him say that. And so we're trying to find his mom. And wouldn't you know it, that his mom was in the kitchen, I think, working, and maybe got distracted, or maybe he left to where he was supposed to be. I'm not for sure. But for him to be united with his parent, with his mother, was just a wonderful thing. And if I could just challenge you, when we cannot see the ones that are close to us, that sometimes it's just really hard. There's a trepidation that it's in our heart. And Job is a man who is a child of God, no doubt. Look at Job chapter 1. We've been through Job enough. And matter of fact, some of you that are in the adult Sunday school class, a couple of the verses that we read, we was there when through Brother Mark Rasmussen's book, Legends in the Bible. And Job was one of the characters that we have went through after the last many weeks. But Job is a child of God. Most people feel like Job is one of the oldest books in the Bible, meaning that it was probably written before the flood. And so if that is the case, then the Mosaic law is not there, all the commandments that's there. And we know that Job doesn't do, everything right. Nobody does. But the Bible says he's a perfect man. That means he's complete or mature. He's upright. He's a guy who fears God. He eschews away from evil. That means he stays away from evil. He's trying to be perfect and pure before the Lord. And matter of fact, verse number 12 referred to it there. Let me just read it for a second. It says, neither have I gone back from the commandment of his lips. I've esteemed the words of his mouth more than my necessary food. So this is a fellow who has been walking with God. He's done that. He's been concerned about his family. He's been concerned even that they might do wrong. And having that said, just because this man has done right doesn't mean that there is not sometimes that comes in his life. And I would say it doesn't mean that just because we do right, that there are certain times that come in our life where we really just can't see God. Maybe we can put it like this. We don't quite know what God is doing. And so for just a few moments here, I want to talk to you about a few things that hopefully will be able to help us. The problem is Job can't see God in this situation. And he needs some help in this. Maybe you've been in a similar situation like that you have wondered, okay, where is God at? I mean, we know where God is. God is in heaven, right? Jesus is sitting at the right hand of the Father, according to the Scripture. We know that his Spirit is within us. We know that he's dwelling within us. One day he's going to quicken us. And the Spirit of Christ has come in. What is in Colossians that commands us? I think I read that earlier today. The Spirit, that Abba Spirit of Jesus has come into our life. But just because we're saved and just because maybe we're reading our Bible and praying, it doesn't always mean that there might be some times where we can't see him. I'm reminded of the story, and you might be reminded of this as well. The old preacher that was in my life, he used to talk about this story, but there was a young boy that was on a ship, and his dad was the captain, and there was a tumultuous storm that came about. Big, large swells that would come, and some of the water that would come on the boat, on the ship that's there, and through the storm over many hours, and there was this, the little boy that's there caught the eye of an adult man that was on there, and he watched the little boy, and he was pretty amazing how so many swells and so much water that came on the boat and how it rocked the boat or the ship. But the boy didn't seem to be scared. And now as the boat is over, I think the story is that the storm is over and the sun is out. The man, his curiosity got the best of him. So he goes over to the young boy and says, "Son, why is it that you were that you weren't afraid, that you were just so calm during the heightened bit of the storm?" And he said, "Mister," he said, "I want you to look up there." And he says, "I want you to see at the top. You see that man at the top who's at the helm? Who's at the ship well?" He said, "Yes." He said, "That's the captain." And he says, "Sir, that's my dad. And if he's not afraid, I'm not either." But listen to me. Sometimes we might know where God's at, but we cannot see him with our physical eye. And just because we can't see him does not mean that he's not there and he's not trying to help us. Can I give you the first point? Look at verse number 8 and verse number 9 again. This is what it says. This is what Job is saying. So many good verses in this passage, but here's a great line. Verse 8, "Behold, I go forward, but he's not there. And backward, but I cannot perceive him." He's lost all of his children. He's lost most of his wealth. His wife has said, "Curse God and die." "Behold, I go forward, but he is not there. And backward, but I cannot perceive him. On the left hand, where he doth work, but I cannot behold him. He hideth himself on the right hand, that I cannot see him." Those thoughts, that's there. I don't know if it's turned around, but I did do the left hand and the right hand right. But the thought is that Job cannot see. He cannot see God working. He knows that he's there. I mean, in verse number 11, "Will he plead against me with his great power? No, but he would put strength in me. He knows what God's capable of. He knows how God could help him in this time. He's wondering where God is. Can I challenge you that sometimes we as people, we feel that if we can't see God, that he must not be doing anything. That is nothing farther from the truth. Just because we can't see him, friend, doesn't mean that he's not doing something. The people who know, you people that you have seen God work in your life, and you have seen him unmistakably do something mighty in your life. I mean, you've seen him or seen him do some in somebody else's life, how he healed someone of disease, or he's protected you supernaturally from a car accident, or someone who gets saved, who has lived a wicked lifestyle and you've seen, or someone who's been restored that's from your prayer that's been backslidden. And I mean, I just think about different things. I think about Miss Amy Costello with her dad, and I believe I've seen a change in him over the years since he made a decision there years ago and came to church. We prayed for him for years and years, and his family prayed for him for years and years. And just thinking about if we've seen God do something, we say, that's unmistakably God. We long to see him again. We don't just want to see God work one time, but we want to see God work multiple times. And friend, I just want to challenge you, just because you can't see him, just because I can't see him, does not mean that he's not working. But number two, I want you to think about this. We need to understand that his working, though unseen, may be unpleasant. Can I remind you of verse number 16? We read it there a minute ago. Look there with me again. He said, "For God maketh my heart soft, and the Almighty," look what it said, "troubleth me." That's what it says. Troubleth me. He's in trouble. He's in difficulty. He's lost his family, at least his children. He's lost most of his wealth. And all of this was not because he had done anything wrong. And it's not because he has sinned against God. It's not because he was backslidden on God. It was that God chose to work in his life in a special way. And since God chose to work in his life a special way, there was something that was unpleasant that came on his world. And I think of even today that I believe God's still working. I believe God's still working in not only in our own lives, but I think God's still working in our nation. I think God's still working in the world today. I heard someone say something, and they called me earlier today, and they said, preacher, said, at first when I got up this morning, I was thinking, that our world, after hearing about what went on last night, that our world is just falling apart, and I was kind of discouraged. But then I got to thinking that it can't get much worse, and maybe that's not the case. But he said, it must be getting better from here on out. So we got some work ahead. And he had a positive spirit and a positive attitude. Can I just say, regardless of what happens in our world, regardless of what happens in our county or in our city, can I just say it like this, that God is working, and sometimes he works and brings unpleasant things in our life, but it is his work and he has an agenda with that. He wants to do something. Sometimes he brings sicknesses in our life. This past week, I would have never thought that I'd spent 8 days away from Travis, Abby, and Joe, and Melissa, and I'd be with my mom and dad. That was not even on my radar. But I can tell you, it's been a blessing in many areas to be able to spend some time with my dad and spend some time with my mom. And though it was not what I expected and not necessarily what I had planned on for my week, that something was thrust upon me, and I must accept that it was God's will that I be here this week. And can I say that there's some things that happen in your life, and sometimes we can't see him, but he's working, and he's bringing something that might seem unpleasant, but it's bringing a benefit to our life. Lord, I want to see you work. Lord, I want to see you do something. I remember when we first moved to Coffeyville, and some of y'all might remember in my small little world, moving to Coffeyville, Kansas, and moved from Jeffersonville, Indiana, worked at a church there in Sellersburg and Indiana, right close to Louisville, Kentucky. And as I was doing that, and I remember preaching in the book of Luke, we started going through a series on the book of Luke and came to a passage and talking about where they had saw strange things. And so we started praying that, God, please reveal and show us strange things. And 3 months later, we had a flood in our town. And our church was flooded with 8 foot of water. That was strange. That was different. But can I just say, God used that in our church's life. God used that in my life. Some of us look back, if we've been around for a little while, we look back at that time and think, wow, yes, we lost some things. And yes, there was transition. And yeah, there was a few people that weren't able to take the journey with us from that and moved with family. Some were older and some different things. But God did some miraculous things. And though it was unpleasant, we knew God was working. Can I just challenge you that though you can't see God, number one, God's working. And number two, God might bring something unpleasant, but there's a benefit for it. Can I give you number 3 real quickly? Number 3, will you look in verse number 10? Look in verse number 10 in our passage is what it says. But he knoweth, this is what he says, but he knoweth the way that I take. When he hath tried me, I shall come forth as gold. Job says, God knows the way that I'm taking. God knows what's going on in my life. God knows where I am. God knows what I'm doing. And basically, this is what Job says, I must trust him. I must trust the Lord, though he's working and I can't see him. I must trust the Lord, though he's working, excuse me, and he's bringing something that seems to be unpleasant in my life. I must keep my hands on the wheel. I must stay focused. I need to walk by faith. I don't need to walk by sight. Hey, if you walk by sight, you'll look at this world, you'll see what's going on at work or see what's going on in someone's family or even maybe see what's going on in your own family or extended family and may get discouraged or overwhelmed. For sure, it's a nation or sometimes even in the whole world, you think, Lord, so come Lord Jesus, and you think, man, get us out of here. But can I challenge you, as long as you and I have breath to breathe, and as long as Jesus has not come back, there is a job that we are supposed to do. And matter of fact, I think part of that job tonight is just to be in the house of God. Sometimes we don't necessarily know what all we need to do, but sometimes we need to be careful to not try to reinvent the wheel. Let's not try to do something different. Let's keep the main things the main things. Let's keep in the Word. Let's keep praying. Let's be faithful to God's house. Let's tell people about Christ. God help us to be able to, God help me and help you to be able to do those things. God knows how you're living. God knows how I'm living. And we must understand that He knows our way, so we must trust Him. God knows if our heart is right tonight. God knows if our heart is distant tonight. Job makes some mistakes along the way, but in his communication with his friends, he at least makes some mistakes along the way. But Job knows what it's right to be right with God. Job knows it. I must say this right. Job knows what it's like to be right with God. You might make some mistakes along the way. I know I do. But just because we make some mistakes along the way does not mean that we should not know what it's like to walk with the Lord. May we stand before God one day and say that we have strived to live and we've strived to finish our race following your book, living our lives according to His book. And someday, somewhere along the line, everything's going to be over. And someday Jesus is coming back. And someday we will see Jesus face to face. And someday heaven is truly going to be our home. And when we're finished with the trials here in this world, the hardship's over, you can come out of it like gold. You know, I respect people, and I think you do too, that have weathered storms in life. I think of our nation, men like George Washington, and the things that he went through, and his heart and spirit in not wanting to be a king, but willing to be a president, and giving his own socks at one time to some of his soldiers, or one of his soldiers, that the feet were frostbitten because it was so cold. I think of men like General Douglas MacArthur saying, I want to come back and I shall return, and coming back to the Philippines after dealing with the Japanese. And I think of George Patton and how his spirit or his attitude, and men admire men like that. And I have an edifice, or at least a little statue, if you will, or a bust of Dwight D. Eisenhower in my office, and thinking some of the things that he did, and how some of the stands that he made. Were these men perfect? No, not all of them, I think, necessarily were saved, but that they endured hardness. I think of different preachers that have gone through different hardnesses, different difficulties in their life. I think of some Christians right now. There's a young lady that at least I went to school or knew her husband, and she's right now on the verge of death with cancer. Young person in the early 30s, and here life is ebbing away from her. And if it's not a miracle, if God doesn't perform a miracle, and he might, but if God doesn't perform a miracle, then she's going to go to heaven. But wouldn't it be a blessing for you and for me that at the end of the trial, the end of the difficulty, the time where we can't see God, when we finally do, to say, Lord, I trusted you. And Lord, I didn't necessarily see you, but I knew you were working. And Lord, just because you sent a difficulty along my way and the work that you were doing wasn't unpleasant, I didn't stop trusting you. I didn't stop being faithful to you. May God help us to know these things. May God help us with the trust issue. I think probably that's one of the biggest things in our life. I don't think that we can have this type of attitude that we've tried this trusting God before and now we stop. There's never a point where we can stop trusting God. Maybe you can even quote it with me while I'm saying it. Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. We know this verse. Many of us can quote it. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. And in all thy ways, acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. There's a little song that goes with some of the verses there we read, and it goes like this. Behold, I go forward, yet he is not there. And backward, but I cannot perceive him. On the left hand where he doth work, but I cannot behold him. He hideth himself on the right hand, that I cannot see him. But he knoweth the way that I take. When he hath tried me, I shall come forth as gold. He knoweth the way that I take. When he hath tried me, I shall come forth as gold. Maybe right here tonight you're dealing with something that you're like, God, I don't see you, and I don't know how this is going to work. Maybe what you need to do for a minute is just get down on your knees and trust God and say, Lord, I don't know how you're going to do it, but I know what you've commanded me to do. And Lord, I feel like that if I do what I'm supposed to do, then you'll do what you are supposed to do. I'm going to ask Travis to just come to the piano there for a minute. Brother Galen will probably be, or somebody will be there maybe here in just a moment. And maybe everybody just wants to quietly just speak to the Lord, maybe themselves. But I think in this time of our nation, this time in our church, and time just with things that are going on, maybe in our own personal world or at workplace, though we can't see God, we need to remember that he's still there. May the Lord bless you tonight.